Hello, everyone. This is James Nussbaumer, and welcome back. Now we're jumping into Chapter 18 called Your Spiritual Flashlight. Before we get going, I would like to say that I had so much fun writing this particular chapter. The magician David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear back in the 1970s on national television at prime time. I watched this event, as did many others from around the world, fascinated and excited by an illusion everyone knew could not truly be real. Although it seemed real, he used a method to obscure our view of the Statue of Liberty and divert our thoughts into the dark New York City sky, projecting an image of an absent Miss Liberty. The world wishes that illusions can give us something, but they never really do. It's the ego's world because the ego dreams of ways we wish things should be. The ego is a thought system separate from the one that created us. It's a choice we think we have that doesn't exist and has no meaning. It's a thought that humanity has chosen to keep since the dream of time and space began, believing it can determine its own immortality in ways to get there. The ego contradicts itself by believing in immortality while it fears its own death. Because of its twisted madness, it doesn't really believe in anything, and like all dreams, it will end. The ego knows this, and out of its guilt for separation from the one mind of truth, it fears its own mortality and maintains the attitude, get it all now and get all you can. All this chosen nonsense is for one purpose, and it can only be for its own gain. Early on, I mentioned that we need to notice our feelings of guilt, to observe them. Our guilt and fear are areas of darkness in our minds where the ego sits and looks on, continuing to worry about its own existence. The ego is afraid of light because light exposes darkness, and the ego fears being exposed. It feeds on your fear to help it hide. If you don't face it head on, fear will remain to feed its existence. You might be ashamed of your own guilt, but these feelings must be exposed, or the ego will use these guilt feelings to strengthen its foundation. By exposing it, I'm not suggesting that you go out and announce your guilt to certain people that you meet. In fact, this is the worst thing you could ever do because it will only expose your ego to other egos who think their way is better. Other egos will wish to destroy your ego, so their ego will feel stronger. Then you will be target for comments, ridicule, and all the other things that will only make your ego feel defensive and thereby feed your ego, not dissolve it. Isn't this an unsettling or fearful thought in and of itself? But what you can do is simply intimidate your own ego by looking directly at it. Yes, stare at it as you notice the feelings of guilt and fear it was trying to project onto you. By doing this, you are letting the ego be aware of the real you, exposing the ego for what it is. Do not criticize or condemn it. Just simply notice it. Look at it much like you would your child who has misbehaved or is being very bratty. Don't scold it, but merely look at these feelings, or fear and guilt, which make the ego what it is, will take cover over you and will be what it wants you to be. So don't scold it. Let it see your presence. That's it. Let it know that you are there. By doing this, the ego is getting the message that you are not part of its antics any longer. The ego will think and wonder what it is you're up to. It will produce more feelings of fear within you, and then you will need to look at them as well. The ego will worry because it knows it cannot survive without you. When the worry sets in, observe that too. Look at it closely. You are no longer held a prisoner by these feelings when you do this. Consider when a dark room is exposed to light. The room no longer is dark. Because of its exposure to light, the dark room becomes non-existent. And now it is a different room with new meaning, one light. What you are is truly light. The light is your reality, and when you observe the ego and its means for survival, you are bringing light to the darkness. The only way for darkness to return is if the light goes out. But your true light, with a capital L, your true light forever shines and never goes out. The light, with a capital L, the light is your true essence. Here's what I'd like you to consider doing. Try to imagine having a good-sized flashlight in your mind, the kind you would use to look into a dark corner of a closet or in the attic of your house. Once again, as I said way back previously, when I say in your mind, I'm not talking about your brain. I'm talking about in your true essence. So imagine you have a good-sized flashlight in your mind, the kind you would use to look into a dark corner of a closet or in the attic of your house. You're able to aim this flashlight anywhere in your mind for security reasons. Use it often when you feel the ego hiding in a corner of your mind. When the ego is at work on these feelings of guilt, fear, and worry, even insecurity, merely shine the flashlight directly on these feelings, exposing them like a burglar caught in the night with the goods. Shine the flashlight on the ego's face, exposing the illusion for what it is. Once again, do not show any emotions, though, towards this observation, because if you do, it is another trick by the ego to pull you back in. All you want to do is to let it know that you have exposed it. There's no need to get emotional by getting upset. Once you have exposed it by shining your mind's house flashlight into its face, notice how it makes you feel. Observe your good feelings of joy and peace. By now, there is one more question to ask yourself during this process as you observe yourself holding the flashlight and shining it into the ego's territory. That question is, who is the observer watching you operate the flashlight? Well, with the knowledge you have gained thus far in this book from absorbing these words, couldn't we say it is the Christ mind within you? Or, more simply put, it is you as the face of Christ. Look at this flashlight that shines in your mind as your true essence. It is the light that you are. From here on, throughout this book, we will be referring to your spiritual flashlight for the situations where light is needed to sidetrack or neutralize the ego in you. Be sure to keep this close in mind as we move along, and please keep your flashlight handy. The light that you are, the light that you are of, will keep the ego from running rampant, as well as keep its antics to a minimum while you dream of time and illusion as your essence leads you to reawakening. If you do not allow your true light to shine and radiate, you will not be at peace or fulfilled, except for temporary periods of time when you satisfy your ego, which will reward you with temporary pleasures. But don't get me wrong here. I am not saying that you should not have these kinds of temporary pleasures, such as a nice home, car, and the things that you enjoy. By all means, our divinity wants us to have all of these nice things while we are in the dream of life. You should be recognized in your community when this type of happiness is the result of giving of yourself and not the result of a temporary thrill made by the ego. If you have nice material surroundings, you will enjoy them even further if you understand that you come into this world with nothing and you leave this world with nothing. This type of positive attitude leaves the ego out of it. You will enjoy yourself while you contribute to the whole picture. For most of my adult life, which was just about all my years in business as a financial advisor, I felt as though I was stuck in the dark, hiding and afraid to come out. Of course, I was striving to go forward in a material world with a business as the focus, but in reality, I was certainly only going deeper into the dark. These temporary gains and possessions and career objectives allowed me to hide inside of them. A certain zone had a hold on me that led me to make wrong-minded decisions, which is easy to do when you think from wrong-minded perception. Deep within, I really wasn't comfortable because fear resulted in any change, even slight, triggered additional fear of it being a threat to the complacency I thought that was keeping me safe. It wasn't long after my involvement with A Course in Miracles that I began learning some enlightening things about my incarceration. Yes, my 10-year prison term. What I learned is I was forced to accept myself as who I truly am because there is nothing material to hide from behind in prison. And nobody was going to help me in prison except my true self. The ego in me surely lost its stronghold, and illusions of a false self could not prevail. Prison is full of egos that are frightened. By hiding nothing, I was able to sense and trust in my own true essence, which had no need to wear a phony hat. This essence, or light, in me has made it easier to share myself, who and what I am about, without having to talk about it. There is an old adage that has truth to it if seen in proper perspective, and that is, talk is cheap. However, as I move on with my own journey, I see that understanding the essence of what I am alerts me to why people do talk cheaply. The light in me surely shows me that talking is not necessary to develop peace within and to allow myself to see that there is no death. I can understand the darkness for what it is, which really is nothing. Overlooking the darkness by seeing beyond it in myself first and then in others, that is true forgiveness. It seems there is a gap between what we perceive and what is actually true. Allow me to paint you another picture. Look at this as two separate peaks of a mountain, a lower peak and an ultimate peak. The lower peak is our perception, where we perceive a direction in a positive fashion, but with uncertainty. The ultimate peak, which is higher and brighter and above all of the cloud cover, is your own knowledge, and knowledge is always certain. There are no doubts where knowledge rests, and truth is always abiding there. The valley between the two peaks is full of uncertainty and untruths, where the land is unkempt and the terrain is tough. Along these rough and rocky roads, the wannabes in the world travel and worry about what if, as uncertainty is constantly a battle for them. But when we live by our right-mindedness, it builds a bridge between the two peaks so we may travel over the valley with ease to our destination where truth is waiting to welcome us. Once over the bridge, all uncertainty is behind us. The bridge, which we can call forgiveness, is built with the help of communication from the Holy Spirit. He has bridged the way. He is able to do this by undoing our past errors and mistakes. This can happen in an instant, and it starts with total surrender. Before I was arrested and taken into custody, I had been hiding from the indictment and then the warrant for my arrest. The news of the details in my case was plastered all over the local newspapers, with the media having a feast. I was embarrassed, ashamed, and in a state of total darkness, flat broke and lost. Only when I totally surrendered to the fact that I was helpless and needed a glimmer of hope that one day I would see light again, only when I literally held the loaded gun to my head, something happened in my mind that kept me from pulling the trigger on that lonely night. Now, as I look back, I am aware it was my surrendered thoughts that acted as the invitation for the Holy Spirit to take over from that point. My material dark thoughts had led me to believe that my daughters would be better off with me dead, as all I felt I was worth was a sizable life insurance policy, which was mature enough to cover suicide. The fear of my material world ending was so strong, I believed that life was no longer where I belonged. Prior to this cash, prior to the loss of cash, and prior to my run into the brick wall, the mere crash, you could say, I had targeted all of my energy and perseverance on efforts to please the world so I might be accepted as a leader. Trying to keep up, being a winner, was my constant focus. All of this strain was due to my attempt to give the world what I thought it demanded. Something told me I was tired of being held hostage. In reality, all I simply wanted was my own true free will to be who I've always been, which is a part of the unseparated mind of God, where wholeness and oneness always wins. I know that I'm following my free will now, which is always God's will, by writing this book. I feel it is necessary to contribute to the whole, to oneness. The words are flowing, and they seem to direct my ink pen onto the page. I'm getting surges of energy as I write, and ideas keep arriving while I'm involved with this project. My goal is to at least help a few individuals find their true light, or a will that can bring them out of darkness. so they can see for themselves that the ego's hold on them is not real at all. I am feeling true strength here from prison as my former unreal self is behind me. I can see each day now how I am growing more and more toward total awakening from the dream. The ego in each of us individually does not like this type of growth, and at first you may feel awkward, though headed in a truthful direction. But it doesn't matter what the ego thinks, because it's only nothing. The ego is illusion. But what is real within us is the Christ mind, and the face of Christ smiles to see us acknowledge the Holy Spirit as our guide. The Holy Spirit will give you the support in anything you need to accomplish your purpose. You know, I find it amazing and gratifying, the guidance I am receiving here in prison as I write these words to compile this book. The resources I need just seem to show up to assist me. The Holy Spirit's communication and the effects of this communication are physically visible everywhere. Remember, as long as we must contend with the ego, our mind is split, but that's okay for now. Just understand that the wrong-mindedness in us needs correction and errors to be undone as we heal our mind on a consistent basis, while right-mindedness fills the gaps. The Holy Spirit will transform perception to knowledge as we need it. As feelings of guilt and fear pop up along the way, simply use your spiritual flashlight to shine them away, to open the eyes of darkness. Isn't that kind of neat? Have you ever perceived something to be true, but were not quite certain, only to find out later it was true? Something happened along the way that gave you this knowledge. Perhaps a change of circumstances, or a different attitude, or a conversation with a friend. Whatever it was not of the ego. It was the Holy Spirit using the law of cause and effect to turn perception into knowledge because you were ready for it. We have said that the Holy Spirit is one-minded and abides in our right mind. Therefore, it is important that you start to recognize the Holy Spirit as within you and not located someplace out there. This is vitally important that you look at it this way. The Holy Spirit represents us and God as the total oneness that we all are. Being that we are joined with God, the Holy Spirit speaks for both. He is the connector of thought, or the bridge we travel on. He is the voice for God. He seems to be whatever meets the needs we think we have in order to perform our true free will. However, the Holy Spirit is not deceived when we perceive ourselves entrapped in needs we don't truly have. The Holy Spirit will use time to physically arrange events or not to arrange events. Consider, for example, the experience I described early on in this book of the way A Course in Miracles showed up in my life. And while in prison, how did a very clean, untarnished copy of A Course in Miracles land on that bunkside cabinet the way it did, where no one had a clue whatsoever of what this publication even was? Did it appear out of thin air? Of course not. But there were unexplainable circumstances as to why and how it was left there. These are the things and events that I am not even supposed to be aware of or understand. But, however this occurred, there was a cause that resulted in an effect. The bottom line is, A Course in Miracles found its way to me, and at an appropriate time in my life. I guess we can say it was because I was ready and willing. Was this a miracle? What would you call it? Remember, we said everything happens for a reason, and it may not have a single thing to do with where you are at now, but there is a reason. There are events taking place at this very moment that may have an impact on an important and necessary change coming to your life soon, or perhaps not so soon. The Holy Spirit is responsible for right-minded perception, but he also may use wrong-mindedness and wrong-minded occurrences to enhance his goal for you. The Holy Spirit is concerned with your true free will. Once you truly acknowledge and accept this, you have become ready, and changes will begin occurring along your journey over the bridge. Thank you. We're done with this session. The next session we will continue with Chapter 19.